Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Barbara White, and on behalf of everybody on this symposium, I'd like to welcome you to today's Women's Symposium, which happens to coincide with Women's History Month. That's so convenient. This is the third symposium to date. The first one occurred in 2014. It was live at the International Karate Championships, the 50th anniversary. There's such enthusiastic response to that it created a desire to have more of these. It wasn't until this pandemic year that we created the opening for Zoom. And the second symposium took place in July, and now we have this symposium today. So just very happy to welcome everybody. As you know, the world's changed pretty progressively in the last couple of years. In relation specifically to women, there's been an increased awareness of the inequities and the social biases that women go through. I read an article on March 19th. It was from the Washington Post. It cited that the women's NCAA and men's AA basketball teams, it showed a widespread disparity between the two. This prompted some outrage and a call to action, which I think is good. There are some good things happening. As you know, we have a woman who's the vice president in our country. And on the 24th of March, we do have Equal Pay Day, which I think everyone can agree it's high time for that. The purpose of our symposium is to highlight women. It's to unite our Kenpo community. It's to recognize leaders, and it's to give opportunities for more women in Kenpo. This time I'd like to really pay tribute and acknowledgement to the early pioneers of our art. Glenda Ingram, there's Mickey Moore, Jackie McVicker, Doreen D'Orenzio, Diane Tanaka, and Shalene Herring, who happens to be on our panel. These women forged history in Kenpo, and we so appreciate them. They gave us kind of training ground to come up on. I have a special thanks that I'd like to give to two men, Senior Master Bob White, my husband, and Senior Master John Sepulveda. These two men have demonstrated recognition and respect for women in the arts, and we're so appreciative of you. Today's panelists, we have over 379 combined hours of experience under our belt. And I, for one, am looking forward to what I can learn from each and every one of these women, and look forward to this symposium. I have now the honor and the privilege to introduce Heather Flessing. Heather is not only an outstanding martial arts artist, she's my friend. She is, if you hadn't seen the promo video that we had on Facebook, she's the creator of the promotional video that we had. Her organizational skills are tremendous, and she is the best person for this tough job of being a moderator. So Heather is a third-degree black belt who began her karate journey at Bob White's Karate Studio in Costa Mesa, California in 2010. She attended karate tournaments in Southern California and Nevada, achieving first place in sparring as well as forms in many of these tournaments. In addition, Heather is a blue belt in jiu-jitsu, Brazilian jiu-jitsu. She's the staging coordinator for our charitable events for Royal Family Kids. She has taught children's classes and adult sparring classes. She has created self-defense classes for women in an effort to share her knowledge with other women. Heather lives in Orange, California with her husband and her 3 cats. She's a reading interventions teacher at an elementary school in the nearby city of Fullerton, and she loves teaching. She also teaches a college accounting course at Cal State Long Beach, Cal State University Long Beach, and in addition to being a teacher, Heather is an avid learner and received her master's degree in both education and accountancy. And it is at this time that I hand over the difficult task of moderating to Heather Flessing. Heather, you're on.
Great. Well, thank you, Barb. I'm going to go ahead and just give you an overview of how the symposium is going to work today. If you were here for the one in July, this one's going to be a little bit different. We have a few less panelists, which will give us some time at the end for a question and answer time. So I'll be introducing different panelists, reading their bios, and those panelists may also read bios of other panelists. So you'll get a chance to hear from lots of different people. All the panelists will be answering a predetermined question, and so they'll have a couple of minutes to answer that. And so as they are presenting, if you find that there is something you would like to know, you are welcome to contact them or ask them a question via the chat feature down at the bottom. I would recommend that you send the questions to me. So you'll see that you can send them to the host, and that would be me. And you are going to just send it in, and then I will, if it's addressed to a particular participant, I will ask that participant the question at the end. If it's a more general question, then I actually have a 10-sided dice, a 10-sided die that I'm going to roll, and each participant has been given a number, and I'm going to take 2 numbers because I'm not going to answer a predetermined question at the beginning. And that'll allow just a random assortment of people to answer the question at the end. So at this time, I'm going to go ahead and introduce our first panelist. And Rebecca Knight is our first panelist. She was in the July symposium as well. And her childhood was difficult at best. She grew up in a religious cult in Mexico and endured physical, mental, emotional, and sexual abuse for the first 10 years of her life. After moving back to the U.S. when she was 10 years old, she struggled with self-esteem and confidence in every situation, and she doubted that she could ever recover from the trauma she had endured. Rebecca attended her first Kenpo lesson in 1996 and immediately felt something that she had never felt before, a small and delicate sense of worth, which grew over the years to an overwhelming feeling of confidence and strength. She desires to see that feeling bloom in the hearts of the students that she works with as well. She was proud to have been included in the Kenpo Continuum by Amy Long in 2008 and was featured on the Kenpo Women website in 2012. She is most humbled by her inclusion as an honoree in Tom Bleeker's The Journey, Book 3, American Kenpo's Next Generations in 2019. She and her husband own and operate the American Institute of Kenpo in Tucson, Arizona, and celebrated their school's 20th anniversary this past September. Rebecca, so being the owner of a school has provided you with the unique position to meet a variety of women. And I'm sure these women come with their own views on martial arts and have their own reasons for joining a Kenpo school. So my question is, Kenpo is a self-defense system utilizing efficient moves to neutralize a threat. And some women may see these moves as being too violent. So how would you handle this?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. It's wonderful to be here for a second time with these awesome ladies. And I would handle it with understanding. The average lady is not looking for violence, and that's not going to be her number one go-to. So if I can understand her perspective first, then I can point out a couple of things that may help her understand mine and why I choose this as my method of approach, and why I empower every woman to learn martial arts, even if it's just a simple self-defense class to get started. The number one thing that she can do that doesn't involve violence is prevention. If you can prevent anything from happening by using simple tools like acceptance, we learn from the Infinite Insights when we're discussing the 8 considerations of self-defense, acceptance is number one. Now with my childhood, I already could accept that violence and bad things in the world could happen because those were my first memories in my life. So it was easy for me. However, a lot of people that haven't had those terrible things happen to them or someone they know can't put their mind in a position to accept that that danger does exist. Once they accept it exists, then they can start awareness training. And a really good friend of mine, a student, Darn Armstrong, she has a wonderful seminar series that she does, and she's actively doing Think Safe seminars. And everything she does is geared around prevention and awareness and using the tools that you have and not having to resort to violence if you don't have to. And then the third thing I would tell her before the escalation starts is your number one tool you have as a lady is your mom voice. I know I'm speaking to a lot of moms out there, and when moms yell stop and they mean it, everybody freezes. So you have these things at your disposal without having to take that next step, without having to escalate, without creating a violent scenario. Now, I think of preparedness as the next step, kind of like a fire drill or a fire plan. If you don't have a plan, you plan to fail. If you're trying to prevent fire, you manage the things that are plugged in your house. You manage the brush outside to make sure, well, we live in the desert. We manage the brush outside to make sure there's not issues when it comes to fire. But if we didn't have a fire extinguisher, if we didn't know how to stop, drop, and roll, if we didn't know how to contact the local people who can come and help us out in the fire departments, we would only be halfway prepared. So prevention can negate the majority of the problem. But what if it doesn't? You got to be prepared. And it's a matter of escalation. If the danger around you escalates, so should the methods that you utilize to prevent your physical danger or maybe the people around you that you're trying to protect. Now, I've been very, very lucky that I've had incredible mentors around me. And one of them was my late teacher, Stephen Labounty. And in one of his classes early on as his student, he came up to me training, doing hands-on, and he goes, Miss Rebecca, as he'd like to call me, he goes, you're so sweet. And at first I thought it was a compliment, you know, it's ladylike. And I was like, oh, thank you, Seagung. And he replied with a very stern, I hate sweet. Sweet doesn't get the job done. And he was talking about that level of escalation that you have to get to literally fight to the point where you know you can defend yourself. Now, in my personal journey and my journey as instructor, I know there's a lot of misconceptions and personal boundaries or barriers that women tend to put up. Number one thing is fighting isn't ladylike. And I'm not looking for a fight. If a fight comes to me, I'm looking to bring as much violence to the table as I need to defend myself. So I'm not out there thrashing bozos as I tell my kids or starting fights as I tell the adults, but it's something I have in my back pocket. So if danger comes to me, I have the opportunity to defend myself. I didn't have that as a kid. I didn't know that I could defend myself. And if I did know that I could, I didn't know how. And so that's something that's very important to me, not only as a tool for myself, but to empower others. Another thing, and this is very prevalent among women, whether they came up in an abused environment or not, they just kind of the social norms, is they don't feel they're worth defending. They don't feel like they should stand up for themselves. So when I struggle with that with myself, I think about my kids. It doesn't matter how big, how strong, whatever danger is coming their way, what weapon they have, I'm not going to second guess standing in front of them. I'm not going to second guess standing up to what I need to do to protect the people that I love the most. And I need to be able to enable that, like they say, put your mask on first, you can take care of others. I need to be willing to fight for myself that same way so that I can be around to fight for the people that I really do care about. And that does include my 3 cats, by the way. If you know me at all, that's a big deal. Now, the conclusion is simple. Know what you're willing to fight for. You got to be willing to rev it up. I tell my students all the time, be the blender. You can be the tiniest thing in the room, but if you bring sharp weapons to table and you're defending and for a just cause, bring it on. And another great mentor of ours, Lee Sprague, he had a concept. He goes, in self-defense, make them your bud. Don't stop until they're broken, unconscious, or dead. And that only means not to create the level of violence, but to ensure the level of safety for you and the people that you love. Now, I'd like to conclude with 2 other things that are incredibly important to me. A quote from Seagung Labounty. He used to end all of his self-defense seminars, or all of his seminars for that matter, with a fantastic chant, which is, not me, not today. You got to believe you're worth fighting for, you're capable of fighting for yourself, and today is not the day they're going to take you out. And I use this for everything. When I'm struggling to overcome something personally, not me, not today. When I'm nervous about coming to this event and chatting with you guys and sharing my story, and I feel like I can't, I go, no, I'm not going to let that get to me. Not today. I'm going to overcome it. And I want to share that with you guys. The last thing is I'd like to thank the amazing mentors I've had in my life. My teacher, Sean Knight, Seagung Stephen Labounty, who's no longer with us, Lee Wedlake, Bob White, John Sepulveda, people that I know have done tremendous things to mentor and encourage me. And if they've done it for me, they've done it for you too. So I'm very grateful for that. It is now my honor to pass the torch and introduce our next lady. Kim Capel started her Kenpo journey in January of 1997 under the instruction of Senior Professor Gil Acosta and Senior Master Sepulveda's Santa Clara Kenpo Karate School in California. She currently trains at Associate Professor Sandra D's Santa Clara Kenpo Academy. Kim is Mr. Acosta's first black belt and currently holds the rank of 4th degree black belt in the advanced Kenpo training systems founded by Senior Master Sepulveda. Since 1997, Kim has trained under Master Larry Beltramo and Senior Professor Gil Acosta in the Santa Clara kickboxing program, as well as under Senior Professor Gary Murray in Kenpo. She's participated in the NorCal Kenpo's group's monthly workouts and weekly test preparation sessions since its inception. Thanks to the connections from the NorCal workouts, Kim studied knife for a few years under Professor Chris Tanaka from the beginning of his Tanaka Integrated Knife System program. 3rd degree black belt Dr. Wani Win, who would present a challenge for any opponent in kickboxing and jiu-jitsu, was a significant influence and support to Kim as well. Kim is a mechanical engineer with extensive experience designing, developing, and managing products from concept through production in aerospace, commercial, wind energy, telecommunications, medical device, and pharmaceutical industries. Among the many products and programs she's worked on are NASA's Space Shuttle Life Sciences programs, laser power supplies, rotary lasers and accessories, wind turbines, test and assembly equipment, and inhalers treating agitation, seizures, and migraines. Kim, welcome. And my question for you today is, what are some barriers that are unique to women in training in Kenpo?
Thank you, Ms. Knight. It's probably cliche by now, but I've been told that barriers are just challenges and opportunities. That's always easy to say when it's not impacting you. Because there's nothing innate in women that prevents us from learning and executing Kenpo well, there's only one barrier that can be unique to women, and that's gender bias. I'm aware that people in all gender groups have similar struggles, but I'm just focusing on women because of the specific question. 5 years ago, I attended an equipment design review for a company I worked for. There were about 10 other engineers, all men. An engineer sitting across the table from me said, "You're an anomaly. You don't meet many intelligent female engineers." I paused and I said, "I know what you mean. I haven't met many intelligent male engineers." There are many complex issues and interactions that stem from gender bias. The impact ranges in severity from seemingly harmless awkwardness to deadly hatred. Some people will attribute every characteristic to our gender rather than being human, and anyone falling outside their narrow definition is an anomaly. I'll talk about some gender bias examples and some of the ways that Kenpo actually helps mitigate these issues. Some bias examples that apply to more than just Kenpo are driving women out of activities. Some people will deliberately use excessive force to the point of injury. Some will tell us and try to show us that the techniques don't work, and nobody wants to learn self-defense that doesn't work. Sexual innuendo or unwanted advances while training can also drive women out. Some people will be very patronizing, and they'll say that you did a great job when you didn't, and they'll have very low standards for you. Others will refuse to work with you and even avoid pairing up with you on the mat. Then there's what I call being too respectful. A lot of men are taught not to hit women, and it's very difficult for them to overcome that and train with us to help us be successful in our self-defense. Others will make assumptions and generalizations about all women based on their interaction with one person. Now, there's a number of things within the Kenpo system itself that help mitigate these issues. We all wear the same uniform. We're equal and there for a purpose. The pledges, sayings, and values are also helpful. The meditation before and after class helps clear the mind of the issues that you've been through the day and help prevent injury. In the book series Infinite Insights into Kenpo, the formalities and rituals of respect are detailed and they become ingrained in the students. Also in Infinite Insights, individualization, customization of the material, and innovation are repeatedly mentioned. Tailoring to gender is not. There's also symbology of the circle representing friendship in the art. So Kenpo tells us we're all very different. and we can be friends, and we can work together successfully. I was fortunate that the first martial arts school I walked into, the leadership was passionate about self-defense in a real situation. They also addressed issues as they came up and eliminated toxicity from the learning environment. They required everyone to spar each other. They rotated partners during classes or seminars, and they had all ranks teach. The black belts jumped into technique line with all ranks. A lot of progress has been made in the U.S. from the time women were considered legal property and were prohibited from education and activities. But issues that stem from gender bias aren't going away in our lifetimes. The World Economic Forum has been publishing a global gender gap report for the last 14 years. 153 countries are included. And it shows on average it'll take 99.5 years to close the gender gap globally, 151 years for North America. And in one category they studied, 257 years. Despite everything I've experienced in my journey, the toughest barrier I've encountered has always been myself. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Kim, for that insight. I'd like to go ahead and introduce our next panelist, Denise Plowman. She's a 5th degree black belt under the instruction of Senior Master John Sepulveda in the Advanced Kenpo Training System. Her Kenpo training began in 1994 under the instruction of Mr. Steve Moore at the newly opened Boise Kenpo Karate School. She was promoted to 1st degree black belt under the American Kenpo Karate System at the Jeff Speakman camp in 1998. She was the first woman to be promoted to black belt in a Kenpo organization in the state of Idaho at that time. In 1999, Mr. Stephen Moore decided to pursue his career in law enforcement, and Denise made the decision to take over the Boise Kenpo Karate School. She was also an amateur full contact kickboxing coach and trainer, and she had a handful of fighters who competed in both Idaho and California. In 2011, due to a promotion in her career which required a lot more travel, Denise made the decision to close the Boise Kenpo Karate School. In 2017, Denise retired and recommitted herself to her Kenpo journey. Once again, she began teaching students out of her garage and continued her training directly under Mr. John Sepulveda. She also continued to train in kickboxing at a local Muay Thai club and has recently begun training in the art of Bakit Tertia. Denise, my question for you is, throughout your years in Kenpo, I'm sure you've encountered women who have decided to quit training for a variety of reasons, but I would also hope you've encountered women who have trained hard and they deserve recognition for their efforts. So how can we encourage more women to remain in Kenpo, become active, speak up, have their voices heard, and receive the recognition that they deserve?
Thanks, Heather. So as I got this question, it was easy to kind of really go down into the weeds of this. So I started to think about answering the question. We need to look at what type of environment and culture we are creating within our schools and in our training environments. And as I considered my response to this, it became very apparent to me that it could be easily get too far into those weeds of discussing this topic. So there's really many directions one could take. I decided to take a more general approach by asking some questions, as I feel each student and each school and their students have different styles and challenges, but could be able to relate to a more broad answer. So to start, let's look at, are we providing the opportunity for inclusiveness within our schools? Examples could be, are we not creating groups of men and of women for training, but encouraging all to work together and identifying the importance of this as it relates to their self-defense? Is there encouragement to participate in the classes on various levels, like calling on them to demonstrate or explain the technique, or as an instructor, using them as a partner to help demonstrate the technique? Encouragement to get out of their comfort zone and to be an active participant outside, just following the instructor, and instead of just following the instructions of the class. Are we developing training programs to help grow our own leaders within our schools and organizations? Opportunities in assistant teaching as one progresses, or encouraging students to take an active role in being a part of a team involved for maybe tournaments and seminars or camps or other activities that the school may be promoting? Are there opportunities for students to provide feedback routinely? This could be either one-on-one with an instructor or a school owner, or with routine written surveys on how they feel things are progressing for them, and helping them to identify the good as well as the challenging and then adjust accordingly, and asking for their suggestions for improvements. And do you provide exit surveys to those that have decided to no longer continue their training, and to inquire what reasons that might be so that you can assess for possible solutions for future students? Do you have mentoring programs? Are those opportunities available? It could be pairing up a new student or a struggling student with somebody else who can be considered a mentor and or a role model that has been through, the same challenges, or creating a support system that allows openness in discussing their concerns and challenges without judgment or criticism. And do we review how things are communicated with all of our students? This one, looking at eliminating words and conversations that may make students feel uncomfortable, even though oftentimes they are said with good intention, they may be the reason that someone leaves. And some examples that I've heard very recently are things such as, I'm going to teach my female students how to hit like a man. I've never really understood what that means. But to me, a more effective communication would be to indicate you are going to teach someone how to generate the ultimate power using proper technique and strong basics. There's been occasions where I've been in class and I've heard men be sure and take it easy on the women. Change that dynamics to, if you are paired with someone a lot smaller than you, adjust your power to keep your partner safe. Safety is always a concern for anyone facing a bigger opponent, regardless of the gender they identify themselves with. And avoid using terms of endearment such as honey or sweetie or babe, even if it's meant in a caring way. These types of nicknames can make someone very uncomfortable, especially in a professional environment, and may be the reason that someone just might leave at that point in time. So these are just a few of the ideas that I had as I thought about this, but in no way indicates that they are the only solutions, with the idea of helping to promote a training environment that will sustain and grow our female student and leader population. So in conclusion, I have been extremely fortunate throughout all of my years of training to have some outstanding role models, both male and female. I had an instructor who never treated me any differently than any of the other students, which usually was predominantly male, and continually encouraged and motivated me forward to new goals for myself that I would never have dreamed of when I first began. I would like to take this time to thank not just those in the AKTS, but my extended Kenpo family as well, that have been and continue to be a part of this journey of mine. And I hope that what I've shared in this symposium today may be the feedback needed to encourage more women to stay on their martial arts journey. So with that, I would like to introduce our next panelist, Ms. Kelly O'Sullivan. I need to emphasize this first sentence is not mine. This is from Kelly, but Kelly O'Sullivan is mean and evil and wants people to suffer. She's a lover of burpees and gluten-free baking. She was always down for a fitness challenge. Her day job currently include personal trainer, fitness class instructor, head chef, and a dog snuggler. She will soon be pursuing certification in canine training to be able to work with and train police canine units to honor her daughter's legacy in law enforcement. Kelly has been training in Kenpo since 1999 when her husband won the highest bid on the introductory class package at their kids' elementary school fundraiser that was donated by Mr. Gerald Gintu of Karate Ways in Pleasant Hill, California. It took about 3 more months for her to work up the courage to start her classes, but once her feet touched the mat, she knew there was no turning back. A mom to 3 kids, including fallen Sacramento police officer Tara O'Sullivan, eldest of 6 sisters, and an aunt to over 30 nieces and nephews, Kelly always finds time for making healthy treats for her training partners and local police officers. Kenpo has been good to her through the years, teaching her many life lessons on and off the mat, as well as boosting her self-confidence. It has reignited her passion for fitness while helping others find theirs too. After taking some breaks here and there, she earned her black belt in the summer of 2015 under Mr. Rich Goldberg. Kelly's love of fitness has her currently studying how to help women specifically train for their fitness goals based on the fact that women are not small men. She also focuses on learning how to support your body and still train hard through each stage of life. Kelly enjoys in-and-out burger field trips, obstacle course races, stand-up paddleboard yoga, and trying out new paleo recipes, beach runs, hiking around her backyard in the hills of Briones, California. Life has thrown many curveballs her way, but Kelly always finds a soft mat to land on with her Kenpo family. She knows she can count on her sisters and brothers to hit her hard and hug her even harder. She is currently training for her second-degree black belt test in the summer of 2022. Kelly says she is humbled and grateful to be included in the company of these phenomenal female martial artists. So, Kelly, have you ever had to put a student or instructor in place, and how did you handle that?
Thank you, Ms. Plowman, for that. I want to acknowledge you too, because your encouragement early in my Kenpo journey made a huge difference for me to continue. And I also wanted to again thank the women for this invitation, for being here to speak with all of you today. I greatly appreciate this honor. I have actually had to put people in their place, or more specifically understand what my personal boundaries are relating to my Kenpo training. And I've had to try and keep them. Well, not try, I've had to keep them. So it's understanding what I'm willing to tolerate being female, being surrounded by mostly men in a sporting situation, and self-defense training with Kenpo here. So I've had a student try and punch me in the head while I was having a conversation where the student was not involved. And I reflexively was able to throw an extended outward block, and it hurt the other person. And I asked a few seconds later what was up with that, why did they do that? And they stated, well, I just wanted to see what you would do. So I remained calm and said, did you get your answer? And they shook their arm pretty hard and said yes, and walked away. That was one way of holding that boundary, is like, I didn't even expect it to happen, but hey, guess what? Kenpo works. So that was the physical way of doing it, and then remaining calm enough to not like yell at them or be like start an altercation, but to be calm enough to say, you know, what was up with that. So there was that. There's the huggers and the holders in training that you get. And again, my boundaries are my boundaries. And if you're hugging me too tightly or holding me too long, and I'm not okay with that, if it feels off, then I know in myself, I have the courage to say, hey, that's not okay. I use my words. And if words don't work, then I use my actions. So we train to defend ourselves. And if our partners get a little too handsy, I use two options. I either tell them and then I show them. And I've had to do that a couple of times. And I'm not afraid to do that anymore. When I was first training, I really was. I was very timid. And again, I've had my instructors over the years be like, hey, you know what, it's time to bring it. So having these opportunities to do that on the mat with other people has really helped me as well. So yeah, you tell them or you show them. And if that doesn't work, then you start going up the ranks and talking to people, but I'll get to that in a minute. So training partners, students, instructors, people that you hold in a certain amount of esteem, I've had to deal with that as well, and kept to my boundaries. So there's banter on the mat. That's one thing. When you're in class, then, you know, if that's within your realm and your boundaries, that's okay. But when you're alone and the banter continues, or there's lines crossed, words said, or they're hugging and holding, you have to take your stand and be courageous enough to do that. And a few times I've had to do that. So I've used my words firmly. As Rebecca stated, your mom voice, it's a big mom voice works. It does. And kind of leaves the other person feeling quite sheepish. So that there was always that. And knowing, you know, that if I had to defend myself in the situation, I could. And not everyone is like that. I just want to make that clear. Not all of my training partners have been like that with me over the years. These are very few and far between incidences. But I think it's just a matter of knowing your own boundaries and keeping them, and being able to verbalize what your boundaries are. And if you can't verbalize it, you can show them. And remember to be calm. And no matter if they're testing you about your knowledge or your strength or your character, or they're just crossing the line, speak up. And if it's a training partner, tell your instructor. If it's your instructor, you tell the school manager. If it's the school manager, you tell the owner. If it's the owner, you need to decide if you're going to leave the school and just go on your way, or you're going to speak to, if there are other women training with you, if you are going to speak with them and find out if this is actually happening, not just to you, but to others as well, and then decide how you will move forward with this. So again, it's purely up to you. I've never had that much of an issue where I wasn't able to defend or take care of my boundaries. So, so there's that. And then, yeah, it's just figuring out what you'll put up with and what's okay for you personally, because what's okay for you might not be okay for another woman. It's really up to you how you want to proceed with that. So putting people in their place, I prefer like just upholding my own boundaries. So thanks, guys.
All right, Kelly, that was some great advice. Thank you so much. So if you have questions, don't forget, please send them in the chat, because there is going to be a question and answer time at the end. And I want to make sure that if you have a question for a particular panelist, or if you just have a general question related to women and their training or anything like that, please send that in the chat so we can answer those at the end. I'm going to go ahead and introduce Barb White. She is our host, and so you saw her at the beginning. But she began her martial arts career in 1991 and holds a 6th degree black belt in Kenpo karate. Barb found her way to her home at Bob White's Karate Studio 5 years into her training. There she met her husband, best friend, and partner, Bob. Together they own and operate Bob White's Karate Studio in Costa Mesa, California. They have traveled to Europe, South America, and throughout the United States, teaching seminars together and sharing knowledge and experience with friends. Barbara and her husband Bob, as well as the Bob White Karate Studio team, actively promote a weekend event for Royal Family Kids, a worldwide organization that provides a week-long camp for abused and neglected children. Barb has been a camp nurse since 2006, and she also runs a karate program at this same camp. Another passion of Barb's is the desire to further the recognition of women in our Kenpo system. She participated in a women's symposium in 2014 at the 50th anniversary of the IKC. In 2017, Barb was inducted into the Kenpo Hall of Fame, and she also feels honored to have been featured in Tom Bleeker's The Journey, Book 3, American Kenpo's Next Generations, and to have been recognized as the Kenpo Woman of the Year in Miami, Florida in 2019. Now, Barb, you've been practicing Kenpo for 30 years now, and I'm sure during that time you have had many different focuses. You worked on many different aspects of your art. So could you please tell us, what is something that you're working on in Kenpo right now?
Thank you, Heather. And, you know, I'd like to share, actually I shared with Denise earlier before the symposium, that this question has really, I've gone through quite a process working on this question of what am I working on today? And in fact, so much so that my husband made a comment about a week or so ago that he thinks that he feels as though he's already attended about 6 women's symposiums since. So it's gone through many drafts, many renditions of drafts. And I came to the simple conclusion that what I'm working on today is the same thing that I learned when I first walked through the doors of a dojo and stood in my first meditating horse stance with my left hand over my right. Today, I am still working on my horse stance. I'm still working on basics, on constant and never-ending improvement in my art. I'm working on my spiritual strength and humility. So in essence, I'm working on the elements of the tiger and the dragon. And although that horse stance, the fundamentals have not changed over time, my ability to understand it, observe it, and analyze it has. But first, what I'd like to do is take you back to my original thought process when I was thinking about this question. And I focused at that time primarily on basics. And I emphasized how it's how our basics really dictate our success in Kenpo, and how repetition is the mother to skill, and that we always want to be practicing our basics. And I also used Malcolm Gladwell's book, The Outliers, to emphasize that how people who are considered experts in their profession did so by accumulating 10,000 hours of work in their chosen fields. And I picked basics because I love basics. I love drilling hard, and I love what basics has done for me in my Kenpo. And I really think we have a lot in common, all these women on the symposium, that we really love Kenpo and we really love to work hard. But I wanted to be a little bit more open and informative. So I reworked the question and about, I don't know, excuse me, 5 drafts and 10 renditions to each draft later, I've come up with, what Denise and I talked about, my great epiphany. And that is this, that whatever you or I are working on at this time, whether it's something brand new or if it's something that we're familiar with, it always circles back to our first lessons that we had as a white belt. You know, if I ever get to a point where I think that my basics are just good enough, or if I think that I know everything there is to know about short form 1, if I think that I've accumulated those 10,000 hours outlined by Malcolm Gladwell, I will doom myself to everlasting mediocrity. And I don't think anybody here wants to do that. So what Kenpo has taught me over the years is that I will always be a student. You know, the fraying when you have your black belt and it begins to fray and it turns white. It's just a reminder to us that Kenpo is an ongoing process for all of us. You know, the development of our character takes place through hard work and perspiration on the mat. I have personally spent many years working on self-imposed barriers of doubt and fear that I think all of us have from time to time. You know, Kenpo gives us a chance to work on becoming better versions of ourselves. You know, to paraphrase something that Ed Parker said, it's knowledge and understanding of our art grows with time, work, and dedicated effort. And, you know, I think that we're just all passengers aboard a very unique system that's sophisticated in its simplicity. And it will never cease to amaze us throughout our journey in Kenpo once we open our minds to the things that we didn't know we didn't know. You know, Ed Parker says our mind is like a parachute. It's only good when it's open. So what am I working on today? Well, the same things I worked on as a white belt. I'm working on constant and never-ending improvement, and I'm working on the elements of the dragon and the tiger. So I'd like to leave something that share some ideas of things that you could work on. Is the number one is always work on your basics. Your basics are going to carry you through Kenpo. Number 2, work on growing and understanding in your art. Number 3, keep your mind open. Avoid being that person at the bottom of the well who looks up and all they see is the sky above them. Climb out of that well and open your mind to all the new things that are out there. And not only Kenpo, but all martial arts. Work on sharing what you are learning with others. And lastly, work on something. Always be working on something. Have your mind going that you are going to accomplish something that day. And now I get the chance to introduce somebody who has been working on Kenpo for the past 45 years, Shalene Herring. Shalene Herring was born and raised in Los Angeles, California. Her martial arts journey began at the age of 16 in the summer of 1973 at the University of California, Riverside. Fueled by her desire to protect herself as a single female away from home, she took a course in Taekwondo. After training for about 1.5 years and still yearning for the confidence needed to protect herself, Shalene began to look at other styles of martial arts. In 1976, Shalene was invited to visit the Pasadena studio of the now late senior grandmaster Ed Parker. She decided to give herself a birthday gift by signing up for a course. And thus her Chinese Kenpo journey began with the late Si Tai Gung Steve Herring. Steve Herring was a black belt and manager at Mr. Parker's Pasadena studio. Her martial arts training took place in the studio, at martial arts seminars, camps, in parks, backyards, garages, or any place there was a workout happening. In 1980, Steve Herring relocated to Seattle, Washington, and invited Shalene to visit. Her visit resulted in a new journey as a wife and continuing student. In the mid-1980s, their journey with Siju Marvin Kwan began, learning Northern and Southern Chinese Kung Fu styles. Shalene's Silam training included numerous traditional weapons such as broadswords, double-edged swords, cane, iron fan, staff, spears. She also began training in Yang-style Tai Chi Chuan and learning about the healing aspects of martial arts. In 1995, Steve and Shalene opened Two Dragons Martial Arts Studio in Pasadena, California. Steve developed Chuan Shu, a system which incorporates Chinese Kenpo, Northern Silam Kung Fu, and Yang-style Tai Chi Chuan into a comprehensive curriculum. In 2007, Steve passed away, and it was Shalene's years of martial arts training, of constant practice and discipline that enabled her to survive one of the hardest tests of her time. For the past 14 years, she has been the sole owner and chief instructor of Two Dragons Martial Arts Studios in Altadena, California. Shalene says she is the legacy of Si Tai Gung Steve Herring, and she proudly carries the torch that he passed on to her. So Shalene, this next question to me leaves room for various forms of interpretation. It could be as simple as resolving a solution or as complex as a decision that changed the course of your life. So my question is to you is this: was there a moment in your life that would have gone differently had it not been for Kenpo?
Thank you, Barbara. I appreciate it. First, I am grateful and I'm thankful and I am honored to be here with all of you amazing women. And I listen to everybody and I hear exactly the same thing. Barbara, you're right. It is, we all have been on this journey and we all have been doing these things, and pretty much we've learned, we've evolved, we've developed in lots of different ways because of our journey of martial arts. So we all have had moments. There are moments where there's physical, or there's a moment where it's mental. I would say that I had more than my few moments. And so in just trying to not repeat all of the various things that what we have to do in those moments, I have to say that my Kenpo training, had it not been for Kenpo, my Kenpo training has saved me in a number of instances. Two in particular, where it was a physical altercation where I could have ended up in jail for a lot of hundreds of dollars of legal fees. And what I realized at the moment that I knew that my Kenpo training helped me to keep from going down the wrong path and making the wrong choice, or a choice that would have caused me a lot more problems. That was the point where I said, okay, let me realize what is this thing, this Kenpo stuff, all these years of training, what has it been doing for me? And that's when I realized I started out in Kenpo angry. I wanted to pay back. I had a chip on my shoulder. I had some really hard events that I had to overcome and pick myself up and keep moving. I lacked self-control, self-confidence, you name it, I could claim it. I was that person who was fearful of life and lacked self-confidence. And so my journey as a student when I started was wanting to have revenge, get back, and then the self-confidence started coming as I became a better student. and learning hundreds of techniques and everything. And after that, becoming a very skilled fighter, learning I knew how to defend myself. And then what was going to happen after that? Then I had to come to the understanding that Kenpo, my training in Chinese Kenpo, it changed my life to the extent that I no longer had to prove myself. I could walk away from an event. I didn't have to, I became confident. And I was trying to think, everybody here has said the same things. I became confident. My personal journey was I became confident in knowing that not only that I could just fight and defend myself, but I was confident in myself. I knew how to breathe and to relax and to think things through, calm myself. I knew that I was physically fit, but not just physically fit, because exercise is important, but it maintains those endorphins that keep you in a peaceful place. It keeps you joyful, it keeps you happy, and you can be in that zone at all times. And then the other part of it is that the confidence that came had different levels of learning how to accept and be the person I was becoming, my higher self. It changed my attitude. 99% of that attitude was how I perceived my life. And it changed my acceptance. I love myself. Therefore, I treat myself well, and no one gets to choose how I get treated. And also my success, self-success. I'm satisfied, I feel contented, and I don't have to prove anything or be something or go in a certain way for anyone. And then you learn how to live and have the joy. So I'm forever grateful for what Kenpo, the training that I've had in Kenpo, what it has brought to me, and the tools of life that it has given to me. Because this journey of 40 years plus years in Kenpo has made me a better person, made me find my higher self. So I am grateful and thankful, and I owe a lot of that to my instructors, of the people around me, but more knowing that life is an inside job. We work life from the inside out, not the opposite. And if we do it in that respect, we'll find that place that we need to be in our higher self and for ourselves, and learning how to be grateful and thankful for all that we have, being present, being in the moment. Thank you, Barbara.
Shalene, thank you so much. You're an inspiration, and I thank you for opening up and sharing with everybody here. I think we all have areas where we can relate to you, and thank you. I now have the opportunity to introduce Mylissa Crisp. Hi, Mylissa. Mylissa started her Kenpo journey in 1991 under Mr. Eller in Spokane, Washington, and earned her black belt in 1996. She was hooked on Kenpo immediately, spending 30 hours per week in the studio. She started teaching very early in her training, mainly because she was always at the school. She got married in 1994 and moved into the north area of Spokane. Eventually, she transferred to the North Spokane School to train under Mr. Panting. After her second child was born, her husband indicated his dislike for how much time she was spending training. After many discussions, she decided to take some time off from Kenpo. A few years passed, and during a discussion with her husband about depression, he soon realized that Kenpo was a part of who Mylissa was. He began to see that she was unhappy when she was not doing Kenpo, so she started training again as well as teaching. Mylissa's children started training as well, and around 2003, she started having dreams of having her own school. After discussions and encouragement from Senior Master John Sepulveda, she devised a plan to open her own school in 2006. She built a very small school on her property out in the woods with the intentions to do private lessons for 4 to 5 students. But before she knew it, she had 30, then she had 40, and then she had 50 students. Melissa made the school bigger, and then she made it even bigger. In 2011, Mr. Sepulveda approached her about replacing Mr. Johnson as the AKTS camp director, and she respectfully accepted. With the help of her family and students, she has been directing the John Sepulveda Spirit Camp ever since. She currently holds the rank of 4th degree black belt. Melissa has also raised 3 daughters who have all achieved the rank of black belt in Kenpo. Now, after almost 30 years of training and 15 years of having her own school, she continues to train and teach the art that she loves. So Melissa, you have been running your own school for over 15 years and have been a student of Kenpo for twice that time. You may have run across this unique situation where a student may have suffered from past trauma. So my question to you is this. Sometimes physical engagements such as practicing techniques reawakens trauma. How does physical and emotional trauma impact a person's training, and how do you effectively coach oneself or others who are suffering from these symptoms?
Thank you, Barbara White. And thank you for giving me the honor and the opportunity to be part of this symposium. First thing, when I got this question, I was like, it really touched dear to my heart because of personal trauma in my life and the effects I've seen it have on my students over the 30 years that I've been training. What I have come to realize is first you need to understand and learn how to identify students that have had trauma in their past. In almost all cases, the trauma will be known to you by different ways, meaning sometimes it's cheers during training, sometimes it's defiance, sometimes it's refusal to participate in certain aspects of training, and sometimes it could be as visible as shaking through the students when we're doing certain things like hand grabs or chokes. And I've even had students lose bladder control during class when something happened. All of these are indications of trauma, though they don't necessarily tell you what type of trauma the student has endured in their life. One thing I learned early on is you must not address the trauma head on during class. You will see indications of trauma, and you need to take mental notes of that trauma and address it on a one-on-one situation. And you also need to wait until the person you are working with is ready to deal with that trauma and admit to the trauma. Many, many times students are not able to first recognize that they've been in a traumatic situation or refuse to admit it because they are embarrassed. It takes a lot of training and learning on the instructor's part to learn how to deal with the trauma, because the trauma is just as individualized as the person themselves. Every person you work with that might have trauma in their past, first you need to understand it from their perspective. You cannot go at it with just the attitude, just work through it. Most trauma is either traumatic, meaning it's a one-time situation, or it is trauma that has happened over time, which when you research trauma, you will find that those situations are usually done by conditioning of the person that caused the trauma. A lot of times if it's like a domestic violence situation, it didn't start out violent. It started out with little innuendos of control in a relationship, and it progresses to violence. What I have learned over the years is that conditioning works. When you talk to women, children, and even men that have been in a traumatic situation, when you point out all the indications, they admit that they've been happening for years, they even admit they knew, but they put up with it because it was certain boundaries just crossed a little bit here, and then the next time it's a little bit more. So what I've learned with the conditioning type of traumas is I use a concept we use in Kenpo, and I do the reverse. We do conditioning in the opposite direction. I take those students, and as I train them, I build their confidence with motion, with technique, in a non-threatening environment. I make sure they are comfortable with me, working with me, and then I progress their training until they're able to accomplish what they need to accomplish in a little bit more hostile environment. If you take the heads-on approach, telling them that they have to work through it the first time, you will find almost all will just never return to class. So I have learned over the years, you do not do that. You take a nice, slow process. You need to have the students to build a trust and rapport with not only the head instructor, but everybody else they are working with. You need to coach both the students and the other people they are working with. If you have a student who is scared of chokes, you cannot have another student that is very aggressive chokes attack them the first class. You have to teach your assistant instructors or your higher students to recognize trauma and how to help train people as they come in. I usually start this right away with women's self-defense classes and almost everybody that comes for women's self-defense class, if you really watch them, they have had an instance in their life where trauma has been an integral part of their past, and that's why they're there. Over time, you can build students' confidence, but the trauma will always be there. What I have learned over the years is trauma can have a very negative impact on students if you let it. If you take that and turn it into a positive and teach them that they are wonderful people and the trauma helped, as bad as it was, it helped create the person they are now, that usually helps students to really get past the embarrassment of trauma. In conclusion, you must identify when you have students that have a traumatic instance in their past. It is a very important part of training, and if you are really going to get students to train honestly and with the intent of always being able to protect themselves, you have to get them past that trauma. You have to tell them they are worth protecting. Believe it or not, a lot of people come into the school and they're not there to learn how to protect themselves. They're there to learn how to protect their children or something else. You have to teach them the value of self-worth so they can start putting guidelines and boundaries so trauma doesn't repeat itself. I always like to remind my students that all events in life, good and bad, help create the people we are. Every one of us have bad events in our life, but those bad events or negative events really help develop the character that we are today. They need to understand those negative things really do have a positive outcome if they allow it to. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to be part of this symposium. I really think this is a good thing for the Kenpo community and for women in Kenpo. And I'm really looking forward to having my students learn from these and understand that women are equal to men. We can do everything a man can do. Everybody has weaknesses. Everybody has strengths. And man or woman, it doesn't matter. We all have the same. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Mylissa. Our last panelist today is Jessalyn May Harper, And Sifu Jesselyn May Harper was introduced to Kenpo Karate when she was 9 years old through an anti-drug and gang program called DARE. For the next 3 years, Jesselyn trained with J.R. Diaz, 8th degree black belt in the Parker Planis lineage, and she made it to the rank of purple belt. Then the school district canceled the funding for the DARE program. It was later in life when she returned to train with Sifu Diaz at his dojo. In 2015, she tested for blue belt and began managing the Double Dragon Kenpo Karate Dojo. In 2016, Jesselyn tested for green belt. That same year, she also started her Kenpo Girl blog, which discusses various systems of martial arts, as well as the effects and experiences that martial arts has had on people. Kenpo Girl features articles and interviews from various martial artists and discusses current issues in the martial arts world. In 2018, she became the co-owner of Double Dragon Kenpo Karate and was promoted to black belt. Jesselyn is a first-degree black belt under the Parker Planis lineage. She currently trains out of Double Dragon Kenpo Karate in Sanger, California. She is a former student of the late Grand Master Frank Trejo. Her weapons training focused with J.R. Diaz is Carburon Eskrima, and she specializes in mano largo, mano corta, and spada y daga under Guru Ed Planis. Jesselyn also cross-trains with 9th degree black belt Sifu Marty Zaninovich in Kenpo, Jeet Kune Do, Silat, and Kali. Now, Jesselyn, I know you've had the opportunity to work at your studio with individuals with physical limitations or disabilities. So could you please tell us, how do you welcome those individuals that have maybe a temporary or a permanent physical limitation? And how do you make adjustments on the fly so that everyone's participating while you're teaching?
This is actually a topic I am quite passionate about. For me, we have had multiple students with limitations, and we don't treat them any differently. We have a full immersion program here at our karate school. And pretty much for us, we try to look at what is the goal of the student. And typically, students are coming in are looking for a form of physical therapy. And when you look at the basis of physical therapy, it's structured on teaching and re-educating in proper body mechanics, and trying to get that student situated comfortably. So for us, we will sit down and speak with a student or a parent if they are having issues or have any concerns. For myself, I have a bad back where I actually have a herniated disc. So I had to have the same discussion with my instructor of, I can't be thrown too hard, I can't do an over-the-shoulder dive because there could be permanent disability in my legs at that point of time. For an instructor, the inclusion into the system doesn't just benefit that student, it benefits everyone participating in the class, and even more so the instructor. For myself, when I'm working with a student, I have learned that if the class isn't working out or the lesson, it's not because the student's incapable of doing the system, in this case Kenpo. It's not that the material in Kenpo isn't applicable or able to help that student. It's that I am failing that student in being able to coach them, teach them, and educate them on how to defend themselves and how the system works. For me, I take it all the way back to the basis when I'm working with them. The basic, fundamental, bottom line of Kenpo is the rule of motion, the rules of motion, and not violating those rules of motion. And that's pretty much proper body mechanics, the principles of motion, and those are the exact same exercises and techniques that are worked in physical therapy. So for us, when we bring someone in, we're going to take it down to the basic level of teaching them body awareness and how to properly move and work without violating those rules and principles of motion. With our system, everyone that has been studying the system long enough realizes with Kenpo, we can adjust. That's the beauty of our system. We can alter, delete, insert, rearrange. We can do whatever we need to accommodate and to defend ourselves. The only thing that we particularly need to alter in this situation are strikes and targets. The system is structured for anyone to be able to use it. We as instructors need to educate them and walk them through on how we can get it there. How can we achieve this point? In structure in the classroom, during class, I have found personally having someone that may need a little extra attention, may need a little help, is an excellent opportunity for our junior instructors. At Double Dragon, we have for your black belt test, a brown belt is required to do so many hours of teaching because we are not promoting them just to black belt. We are raising them to be a Sifu, an instructor in the future. So we require so many hours, and I found that these situations are the perfect time for those junior instructors to come in, form a relationship as a Sifu in the training and with the student, but also to challenge them on how can they teach. And it challenges their knowledge of the technique or the kata, whatever we're working on at that point of time. It prepares them to be a better instructor in the future. So really anyone that comes in, and when I say anyone with a disability or limitation, it can be anything from, my herniated disc in my back. It could be an individual that is on the autistic scale, any student with Down syndrome. It doesn't necessarily have to be a disability. It could be an individual that has hearing loss, is deaf. We've had students in the past that have actually been deaf, and as instructors, we're having to now teach the material without verbally talking them through it. It's a matter of showing them how it's going to work. How can we do this? And we're bringing that principle in of feeling that this Kenpo works, making them a believer, as Mr. Parker would say. So for a person that, an instructor that wants to find a way to open their dojo to someone with more limitations, really an essential way is to not treat them any differently than anyone else. Incorporate them into the dojo. Let them be a part of the family, because as they're a part of the family, their classmates will form an attachment with them, welcome them in, and then they will challenge themselves to help them. So that's kind of how we have addressed it in the past. And like I said, I can go on about this for hours because it really is, I feel, an important situation, a topic to discuss, because it takes you as an instructor in Kenpo back to the basics. Okay, do I really understand this to be able to explain it to someone on how to do it? Or is there a way for me to slightly alter this without violating the rules of motion? And it makes you start to look at the system in a grander scale and on a different level. So really, anyone that comes in with any type of limitation is an excellent opportunity for myself or anyone else. And treating them any differently or pushing them to do it differently, it isn't going to take it away from them, but you are going to limit them from having the dojo family experience. So those are my top suggestions on what I would do at that point of time.
Great. Thank you so much, Jessalyn. We're going to go ahead and move into our question and answer time now. And I've got a couple questions people submitted already. The first one is actually addressed to one of our panelists. So this one is for Rebecca Knight. So if all the panelists want to come back on, they can, or I think that might be best. So all the panelists, just go ahead and come back on with your video. Be ready to answer your question. So the questions, we have about 10 to 15 minutes. I know we started a little bit late. So we got about 10, 15 minutes to answer. And I want to give as many of you a chance to answer these as possible. So we're just going to say 1 to 2 minutes to answer yours. So Rebecca, your first question is, there are a lot of knives behind you. How often do you use those? And do you carry any of those with you daily?
I love this question. Okay, so first I'm going to start with the wonderful assortment behind me. We moved into our new studio. We've been in this plaza for 20 years. We moved into our new location, purchased the building about 4 years ago, and it was a mess. We're doing drywall paint, and my husband is hanging his final knives on this wall. This is the first wall to be finished. Since he has, his favorite number is 108, there are 108 weapons. They're not all knives. We have whips, kubatons, nunchaku, you name it, we've got it. A great Gil Hibben collection, as well as a Panda Bear Forge collection. Shout out to Martin Seck. I have played with almost everything on this wall. I have hurt myself with many of them. And I do carry a weapon. A karambit is my weapon of choice. My husband loves the karambit. I carry it in forward grip. He carries it in reverse, yin and yang. But we're weapons fanatics, that's for sure.
All right, thank you very much, Mrs. Knight. All right, the next questions, there weren't any specific people that they were addressed to, so I'm going to use my handy 10-sided dice to see who gets the answer. So let's see. First question, is there a benchmark that will help you believe that women have achieved equal status with men in Kenpo? All right, number 4. Number 4 is Denise. Denise, can you answer that for us?
Oh, man. I think every day it's gotten better as we've moved forward. As I compare to when I first started, the benchmark is just when we are all on a panel and we're all discussing things or working out, and there isn't any need to have to define whether you're a female martial artist or a male martial artist, but you're just a martial artist. And I think once you've gotten to that point, I think that's where we're close to arriving. I think there's still a lot of work to be done, but until you remove the barriers that identify male versus female, I think we have some more work to do.
Great, thank you, Denise. All right, let's get one more person to answer that question. Looks like it's going to be number 8, so Mylissa. Mylissa, can you answer that for us?
In my 30 years, there has been huge improvements. When I first started, my instructor actually took me in the office and said, they don't respect you as an instructor. So when they are that openly disrespectful, I need you to sweep them. I need you to kick them. I need you to do whatever you need to do to get their attention, because I'm not going to permit that in my school. When I progressed through the art and became aware that training and being a mother was a conflict, it took me a couple years to overcome how to make that balance act, because I did not believe that just because I had a baby doesn't mean I can't train, or just because I want to have a baby, I have to do this. And then later, when I wanted to open my own school, all I heard about is how women cannot own schools because they would have to neglect some other part of their life to have a school. They would have to neglect being a parent, or they have to neglect a job, or whatever it is. I think a lot of those stigmas have been removed, but I feel that we still have some work to do. When you go to camps and seminars, recently I went to a seminar where the person running the seminar, within the last 2 years, the person running the seminar removed me from working out with a gentleman and sent me to work out with another female. And I was astounded and a little bit hurt. And after the fact, when I had a discussion with somebody I respect a lot, Mr. Tanaka, he told me I should have stepped up and said, no, I'm not moving. I'm working with this individual. So I do still see situations like that, but I pray that they are fewer and fewer. And as we continue to progress, we just need to stand up and say, why can I not work out with men? Or why do I need to come over here because I'm a female? And we just need to stand up for who we are and what we represent and continue.
All right, thank you. Our next question What advice would you give to women who are thinking of starting Kenpo? All right, number 0, that would be me. Okay, so I think that, you know, if you're considering starting Kenpo, whatever your reason is, you should definitely do it. You know, if it's just to get a good workout, Kenpo can be a great workout. If it's to learn to defend yourself or be able to protect your family or your friends when you're out, you know, that's a great reason. If you want to just have more confidence and not feel scared when you're, you know, out and about, just having that sense of I could defend myself if I had to, that's a great reason to start. Whatever your reason is, I definitely recommend starting it. And I think, you know, just like I think it was Kelly earlier that, you know, got the chance to try out Kenpo, and you know, once she started, she couldn't stop, and that was me. Once I started, I couldn't stop, and you know, it's something that I think everyone should have at least an experience of learning a martial art or a way to defend themselves so that they get that confidence. But that would be my advice. All right, let's see who else is going to number 5. Kelly. Oh, well, Kelly, can you tell us what's your advice for women who are thinking of starting Kenpo?
I think it's actually a great idea. It's not an easy art to get into, but once you're in it, I think you can use this in so many different directions in your life that it will carry you through a lot of things. So if you're looking for something to begin a fitness journey in, or self-protection, or just making new friends, that it's definitely a good place to start. So yeah, I totally agree with you, Heather. Go do it. Do it now. Sign up now.
All right, thank you. Okay, our next question is, which female martial artist has been your biggest influence or example, and why? All right, number 3, Kim.
Well, I think on a personal level, I already mentioned in my bio that Dr. Wani Win was a big influence on me. She's a real badass, for lack of a better term, and she was very supportive, and she could hang with all the guys and was very competitive. But another person recently, I would say Ronda Rousey, I really admire. You know, women weren't allowed to fight in the UFC until recently. They had their first fight in 2013. And Dana White had always said that women will never fight in the UFC. And he didn't reach out to Ronda Rousey and Liz Carmouche to fight the first fight. Ronda Rousey actually kept emailing Dana White asking to be able to fight in the UFC. She pushed him, and she asked him to show up and watch women fight. And man, did they show up. And you can see the huge influence that that had on women's martial arts and on all the participation and all the money it's actually made for the UFC. That was a great milestone to me. And to see all the different types of women that are fighting in the UFC, Ronda Rousey, you know, bronze medalist in judo, and then Liz Carmouche was a Marine who did 3 tours in the Middle East. I just have so much admiration for all these women, and that includes all of you as well.
All right, thank you. We have one last question, and I'm just going to open this to everybody because I want to make sure that the person who answers has an answer for it. Have any women on the panel ever used their knowledge in a real life situation?
Okay, I will go. I often tell my students every day I use my Kenpo in a real life situation. All the way from the environmental awareness to when people come at you in an aggressive situation. Just recently, I had to pleasure of going to Hawaii, and some of my students went with me, and we were in a situation where there was one gentleman that was acting interestingly, and he was definitely a possible threat. I wouldn't say a threat, but a possible threat. And I had the opportunity in a real life situation to point out to my young female students how to be aware, what to do in that situation, how to avoid it. And that type of thing should be addressed with students all the time. And I was lucky enough to be able to do it, hands-on. Even though we were in a really nice, Hawaii is an awesome place, beautiful. Threats can be anywhere. And it was great to have the opportunity to introduce that to my students.
Denise, did you want to answer that one too? I saw you unmuted yourself.
Well, I just kind of agree with Melissa on that. I mean, really, I think not so much that you've actually had to go in and do a technique, but you have put yourself in a situation where you're conscious and aware of things that are out there that you probably, for me, I feel like I've avoided a lot of situations without having to actually go toe-to-toe with somebody. So just that philosophy and that idea of training and knowing, what to look for to redirect you down a different path so that you don't have to actually have a physical confrontation. So I would say that we probably all do that on a day-to-day basis.
Denise, I'd like to echo that as well. And we know that one of the first things that we need to do in a situation or just in life is accept the fact that something could happen, and then have the attitude that we'll be ready for it, just like what Rebecca was saying, and trust our gut. And if something doesn't seem right and it doesn't feel right, it's not right. And very often it doesn't have to be in a dangerous situation. It can be in something that's basically a non-threatening situation, but if you listen to your gut and decide to act on it, you might save yourself some grief down the road. So I completely agree with all you women and that have talked about this. And I want to say real quick, if anybody out there has not read The Gift of Fear, buy The Gift of Fear, because it's an invaluable book to teach us about self-defense.
All right. So we are going to go ahead and finish up. It's a little after 2:30, and I know Ms. White has some closing remarks, and while she's doing that, I'm going to go ahead and put the panelists' contact information up on the screen so that if you have any questions for any of the panelists, you can email them. If you have any ideas for topics for next time, or if you have any ideas for women leaders within your own school that you think would be great possible candidates for being on a panel in the future, feel free to email as well, and we can get in touch with them and see what might be able to come from that. So Mrs. White, thank you. If you can go ahead and close this out.
Well, I'd really like to extend such a great thank you to everybody who is out there supporting us and listening and taking your time out of the day. And what you're doing is helping to promote women in Kenpo and helping to make these symposiums successful. And we just so much appreciate all of your support and listening in. And I'd like to say thank you to every woman on this panel. I know that you guys have spent not only your day to day, but you have spent hours preparing for this symposium. And I thank you from the bottom of my heart. We truly appreciate you. I hope that we have more to come. In fact, we plan to have more symposiums to come. So, take a screenshot right now and our email is up here, and please contact us. We want to hear from you. I will end by saying everybody have a beautiful rest of your day and stay safe out there. And thank you.